In just 1 year, France executed over 16,000 of its own people. For context, that's one guillotine every 30 minutes, nonstop for 12 months. You'd think that's the kind of thing a country does to its enemies. Nope, France did that to itself, voluntarily, with paperwork. Let's go to Paris, 1789, where absolutely nobody is having a good time. Okay, quick history quiz before we start. And don't worry, I already know you're going to fail it. France in the 1780s is broke. Not cancel your Netflix broke. Not even your uncle asks for a loan broke. We're talking the government spent so much money helping America win independence from Britain out of pure spite that it accidentally bankrupted itself in the process. Which, incredible, truly iconic, ruin yourself to make your rival look bad. Name a more French move. I'll wait. So King Louis XVI, a man who by most accounts genuinely just wanted to make locks and hunt deer and be left alone, is sitting on a broke throne, and the only fix anyone can think of is to tax the people who actually have money. Except France runs on this ancient system called the Estates General, split into 3 groups. The first estate, also known as the clergy, who own a chunk of the land and pay basically nothing. The second estate, also known as the nobility, who own another chunk of the land and also pay basically nothing. And the third estate, aka everyone else, meaning like 97% of the country, who own comparatively nothing and get to pay for everything. Shocking system, truly ahead of its time, very fair. Bread prices, meanwhile, are doing that thing where they just keep going up for no reason anyone in charge wants to fix. And when your entire diet is built around bread, and bread suddenly costs half your daily wage, you don't calmly write a strongly worded letter to your local representative, you start looking for a pointy object and someone to point it at. So Louis Desperate calls the Estates General together for the first time in 175 years, presumably assuming this would go fine. It did not go fine. Because the third estate looks around, does some quick math, realizes they represent basically the entire population of France, and goes, hey, actually, why do we get 1 vote total while the clergy and nobility also get 1 vote each? Meaning the 2 groups who own everything and pay nothing can outvote us 2-1 every single time. Wild that a system designed by rich people keeps benefiting rich people. Truly one of the great mysteries of human history. The Third Estate storms off, forms their own thing called the National Assembly, and swears they won't leave until France gets an actual constitution, which is a wild power move from a group that 12 months earlier could not vote on anything. And Louis, God bless him, does the single worst thing a nervous king can do in this exact moment. He starts moving troops toward Paris, which the people of Paris, understandably, interpret as, hey, the king's about to send soldiers to shut us up. So on July 14th, 1789, a mob storms the Bastille, a giant medieval fortress/prison that, fun fact, only had 7 prisoners in it at the time, 4 forgers, 2 guys who were just, and I cannot stress this enough, mentally unwell, and 1 literal marquis being held for being freaky in ways I'm contractually not allowed to describe on this platform. Doesn't matter. The symbolism matters more than the contents. The Bastille represented royal tyranny, and now it's rubble. And France has officially picked a fight it cannot take back. A few weeks later, the National Assembly drops the Declaration of the Rights of Man, basically France's version of "we hold these truths to be self-evident," declaring liberty, property, and resistance to oppression as natural rights, abolishing feudal privileges overnight, and generally making every noble in the country extremely nervous about their next dinner party. Louis, to his credit, tries to just kind of go along with all this, agrees to be a constitutional monarch, figures maybe he can ride this out with his head still attached. Spoiler, he can't. By 1791, Louis is getting real tired of being a symbolic king with all the responsibility and none of the actual power, so he does what any reasonable monarch does when things get awkward. He tries to sneak out of the country in disguise with his whole family in a giant, extremely conspicuous carriage, gets recognized at a random town called Varennes, because his face is literally on the money, and gets dragged back to Paris like a teenager caught climbing out his bedroom window. This is, and I want to be very clear about this, the exact moment the French public stops seeing him as a well-meaning king trapped by circumstances and starts seeing him as a guy actively trying to betray the revolution. Trust, once gone, does not come back. Ask literally anyone who's ever been cheated on. Meanwhile, Austria and Prussia, horrified that their fellow monarchs are getting the guillotine treatment in the group chat, start threatening to invade France to restore Louis to full power, which incredibly makes things worse because now the revolutionaries are convinced the king is secretly working with foreign powers against his own country, which, to be fair, he kind of was. France declares war right back in 1792. The war goes badly at first. Panic spreads through Paris that foreign armies are about to crush the revolution, and in the chaos, mobs storm the prisons and just start executing suspected royalist sympathizers on the spot. No trial, no process, just vibes and rage. Somewhere around 1,100 to 1,400 people killed in a few days in what history calls the September Massacres, which is historian speak for things got really, really bad, really, really fast. By September of that year, the monarchy is formally abolished, France becomes a republic, and Louis, now just some guy named Citizen Louis Capet, gets put on trial for treason. And listen, I've made a lot of jokes so far, and I'm about to make a lot more, but I need you to sit with this one for a second. On January 21st, 1793, Louis XVI, the once king of France, walks up to a public scaffold in front of a crowd of thousands, tries to say a few final words about forgiving his enemies, gets drowned out by drum rolls ordered specifically to shut him up, and is executed by guillotine. He was 38 years old. And here's the thing about revolutions. Once you've proven to an entire country that literally anyone up to and including the king himself can lose their head for the crime of being inconvenient, you have opened a door that does not close. It gets worse from here. Much, much worse. Enter the Committee of Public Safety, a group formed to, ironically, protect the revolution from its enemies, both foreign and domestic, and enter its most infamous member, a small, meticulous, incorruptible lawyer named Maximilien Robespierre, a guy who genuinely believed with his entire chest that the only way to build a virtuous republic was to violently remove anyone who might corrupt it. And so begins the Reign of Terror, roughly 10 months where the guillotine becomes less of a punishment and more of a public utility, running practically nonstop in the Place de la Révolution. You could be executed for being a noble. You could be executed for being a priest who wouldn't swear loyalty to the new government instead of the Pope. You could be executed for writing the wrong pamphlet, saying the wrong joke at the wrong dinner party, or simply being denounced by a neighbor who wanted your house. The law of suspects, passed in September 1793, is so broadly written that it essentially criminalizes existing while anyone doesn't like you, and under the law of 22. Prairial, trials get streamlined to the point of basically not existing anymore. Just a quick yes or no on guilt with no defense witnesses allowed, and only 2 possible verdicts: innocent or death. Efficient. Horrifying. Very on brand for this entire video. And Robespierre, the man who orchestrated all of it, the man obsessed with virtue and purity and rooting out corruption, eventually runs out of enemies who aren't also his allies, and starts turning on the people who helped build the terror with him, and that, it turns out, is the one move you cannot make in a room full of people who are all one accusation away from the same fate. On July 27th, 1794, the National Convention turns on Robespierre himself. He's arrested, shot in the jaw either by his own hand or someone else's, nobody's entirely sure, and the next day, the man who sent over 16,000 people to their deaths gets marched up to the exact same machine, the exact same blade, the exact same crowd cheering, and loses his own head to the very system he perfected. I told you at the start of this video that France executed over 16,000 of its own people in a single year, 1 guillotine drop every 30 minutes for 12 straight months. I didn't tell you that the man most responsible for that number ended up as one of its final entries. The terror ends there, more or less, with what historians call the thermidorian reaction. The rest of the government basically going, okay, that's enough of that, and pulling back hard on the executions, eventually paving the way for a new government, and then, a few years later, a certain ambitious little artillery officer named Napoleon Bonaparte. But that, my friends, is an entirely different video, and if you want me to make it, you know exactly what to do. So here's my final question for you. Was it worth it? France got rid of an absolute monarchy, wrote down actual human rights on paper, ended feudal privilege forever, and reshaped how the entire Western world thinks about government. It also, in the process, executed thousands of its own citizens over rumors, jokes, and paperwork in a system so paranoid it eventually consumed the guy who built it. Maybe that's just what real change costs, or maybe it's what happens when you hand a country full of traumatized, terrified, furious people a very, very sharp machine and tell them virtue is on the other end of it. Either way, the blade's done for today, and honestly, I've seen enough executions for one video. If you liked watching a country collectively lose its head, pun very much intended, hit like, drop a comment telling me who you think deserved it least, and subscribe because unlike Robespierre, I actually plan on sticking around. See you in the next one.